and welcome to the FCI London podcast, where we sit down with some of London's most influential luxury designers to explore their stories and the inspiration behind their work. I'm your host, Imke du Toit, and today I am joined by a designer whose work embodies the essence of livable luxury. Rhahat Syed, founder of Interiorise, leads a boutique North London studio known for refined, practical, and deeply personal residential interiors. With a qualification from KLC School of Design, she received the award for textile research and application. Rhahat blends creative sensitivity with the structured project management discipline she honed during her earlier career in the financial sector. Her work is rooted in functionality, flow, and car material harmony, all shaped by her African Asian heritage and her love for London's architectural diversity. Rhahat, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Imke. Thank you for inviting me to be here as part of your podcast series. It's a real pleasure.
It's absolutely wonderful to have you here. Well, let's just jump straight in. It's just a nice casual conversation to really find out what happens behind your work and to really just dive in, to look at the designer behind Interiorise. So you swapped the financial sector for interior design. I mean, that's a move not many would dare make. And then looking back, was that more about escaping corporate life, or would you say it's more about answering a creative calling?
It's an interesting one, actually. At the time, I didn't think I was answering a creative calling. I worked in the city for many years. I enjoyed the fast pace, the energy, the pressure. And I think at the time, it was more about a change in pace for myself, a new chapter almost. I just had my second little boy. And, I had the opportunity to sort of and really think about how I wanted to, shape my next chapter, my future career aspirations. So I was quite blessed in that I had the opportunity to do that. And, if somebody was to ask me today, was it my cultural calling? I feel as if I was always meant to belong in this space. I love being an interior designer. I took a very long-winded route to get here, but I feel, all those little skills that or major skills I developed along the way have all contributed to the designer I am today. I sort of, when you think about the project life cycle of a design project, you have to have your creative hat on. You have to have your analyst hat on. You have to have your project management hat on. And I remember a tutor actually at KLC saying to me, Rhahat, you've just got to let yourself go. And I think that was, I was so structured and so process driven. And I feel that was the missing puzzle for me with regard to being a designer. I just had to let my creative juices flow and be sort of less in control and less structured. And, it finally clicked and it finally made sense. So I feel that was the missing part of the puzzle.
That's amazing. It's also, like as you mentioned as well, there's multiple hats, multiple skills, and it's fantastic that there are really wonderful skills that you've honed from coming from the financial sector, project management sector as well. And having that combined with the creativity really does create quite a powerhouse designer. So it's really, and as you said as well, having a mentor to say you need to just calm, not be too rigid or that structured, and allowing that creativity to flow, I can imagine would have opened up such a world of different possibilities for you as a designer as well, which is fantastic. Does the industry, ever pressure you to tone down cultural references to fit the, let's say, oh so classic London aesthetic?
Yeah, it's an interesting tension. I feel, there is a perception that London interiors should be calm, should be neutral, should be pared back. But actually, London's strength is in its global diversity. We have clients from, really diverse backgrounds, rich heritage, layered histories. And I actually feel it's a design asset to be able to incorporate those nuances into your design. It's what makes a design unique. It's what gives it personality, what gives it warmth. It's unique to that client. So actually, I've never felt the pressure to tone down my interiors. They're always considered, but being able to balance those cultural nuances is a personal challenge to me. I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
Absolutely. It's also I guess it's good to bring people's heritage and backgrounds, cultural backgrounds into it as well. So I think I absolutely agree with you. It's finding that balance, of course.
I think so. I think so.
If a client hired you to break every unwritten rule of, let's say, good taste in luxury design, I mean, which one would you smash first?
I think it sort of touches upon what I've mentioned already. I'd want to break the myth of luxury design has to be neutral. It has to be pared back. There's always almost, perception that interiors have to have a quiet minimalism to feel sophisticated. But I don't think that's the case. The rule I would break is don't stay in the safe zone. Embrace color, embrace pattern, embrace sculptural forms, embrace dramatic lighting. Those are all elements that I consider in my designs to really bring, personality, uniqueness. I love using color. But, it's always in a cohesive, considered manner.
Sure. I agree. As you said as well, it is balancing the things. And I love what you said, try and get out of the comfort zone. I think a lot of the time we all get very sucked into following trends or, getting stuck in something that's very, very comfortable and trying to break those barriers. And I think that's fantastic that you try and get your clients also to get a little bit out of their comfort zones in that way and not to be afraid to, take those risks. Well, and something, as you said, mentioned earlier, your structured project management background, is quite rare within this industry. Does it make you the calmest person in the room or the most impatient?
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm sort of calm and patient most of the times. I need my team to verify that, but no, I think it makes me more organized for sure. It's a skill that's often overlooked by clients, and it's very inherent, should I say, to the design process. I've already mentioned we have to wear, lots of hats in the life cycle of the project. Those skills, be it the logistics, be it the procurement, be it the budgeting, being it the communication with your contractors or your clients, we all have to operate within a framework of planning, of structure, of budgeting. And I'm thankful for those skills and the fact that I've had the ability to experience those and apply those to my projects almost innately because of my experience. I have friends, colleagues, peers in the industry who find certain aspects of, the design cycle challenging, be it the technical aspects, be it the project management aspects. They are skills that you definitely have to embrace and definitely have to develop. So it is a challenge. And of course, as your practice grows, you can hire people for those specialities. But I think when you're a boutique studio and you're a growing studio, then it's important to understand those skills and absolutely incorporate them into your design practice.
Yes. And as you said, as well as what you've seen, within real time with different colleagues and things, I think you find that your skills are so vitally important and a massive part in what you do. And especially as creatives as well. I think sometimes I myself am a creative as well. So I do understand that as well, where potentially the creativity just goes 100 miles an hour. And sometimes you need those other skills to hone that back again and find the structure, because ultimately the project needs to still continue and have that structure there. So, but that's great. So let's move on a little bit to look at, design philosophy, taste, and the realities of, client work. Does one design principle you stubbornly defend even when clients try to resist it?
I think I would defend letting a room breathe. You have to have space for stillness. You have to have space for calmness. There's a tendency sometimes with clients to want to fill every single space of a room. That corner needs to be interesting. That wall needs to be interesting. And I think there's a real place for defending the ability to create intentional space, to create intentional calm. I think sometimes, a little bit of restraint goes a long way. It's what creates the timelessness. It's what creates the ability then to appreciate the other pieces that you have in a room, the different elements. So absolutely, sometimes I think you need to pull it back to be able to appreciate the larger picture.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with you there. And as you said, allow yourself to creating space, breathable space as well, so that you
Yeah.
said you can appreciate what's in the room. I think, as you mentioned, sometimes just having everything too overly cluttered really just doesn't give you an opportunity to have that calmness, have that breathability, and everything needs its own spotlight in a way as well. So I
Yeah.
think that's really, really lovely. Do you have some issues with some clients when it comes to that, where they really want to put as much into it as possible, or is it quite easy to speak to them about the creating of intentional space and calmness?
I think, yeah, we do have some clients that would like to fill, every single
Mm,
corner of a room. But this is where, our powers of persuasion come in, our powers of diplomacy, absolutely. To be able to guide a client, to be able to make judgment calls, the client, if it's a private client, the
mm,
client is always right. It's their home. They've got to live in it at the end of the day.
sure.
They've got to love it. As a designer, one of our main sort of almost power skills is to be able to direct them and
Mm.
influence them and steer them in the right direction, I'd say.
Sure. And it's all about communication and, open communication from the start, I would imagine as well.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
absolutely, as you said, the power of persuasion. And that's definitely, I think, definitely a skill that is very, very, very much needed as well. I mean, you work extensively with period properties in London. Is
Yeah.
modern renovation slowly erasing the architectural soul of these buildings, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I feel like there's a place for both to coexist. So
Mm.
when we go into a period home, we love trying to retain the original features, trying to
Mm,
accentuate the original features, should I say.
sure.
We like to bring those period properties back to life. So it's not a case of going in there and bulldozing everything that's there already. We
Yes.
really try to appreciate, I guess, and respect the heritage
Mm,
of a
mm,
period property. Then there's also a place for restoring that property if it is a period
yes.
property synthetically, making it functional for modern day living, to make it comfortable, to make it usable, for a
Mm,
family. Are quite fortunate with our client base here at Interiorise because we work for private clients as well as property developers. So
mm,
we always have to consider, flexible layout.
sure.
We embody timelessness. We make sure we can, an interior is enduring. So we always try to look at period properties with a view to enhancing their original beauty
Mm.
and their original heritage, but also making them conducive to how a family would live in them today.
Absolutely. I mean, you must see some incredible period properties. I mean, there's an abundance of them as well,
Yeah.
over in the UK. And I can imagine you must be, see amazing things, and it must be wonderful projects, as you say as well. It is about that balance again, also of restoring, but creating a livable space for, a modern family now. So let's move a little bit into trends, and obviously where interior design is really going. So clients today are more informed. I mean, do you think they now approach interior designers more like consultants, therapists, or procurement managers? I mean,
Yeah.
the clients have really shifted over time, and with so many different things that they can go and research or look into, themselves. What do you think is the approach to interior designers now?
Yeah, I think from the outset, it's really important to establish why the client actually wants to use your services. Why are they coming to you? Why do they feel
Mm,
they need an interior designer? What do they feel the interior designer will bring to the table? It's really understanding how they think an interior designer can help. And I think if you establish that from the outset, you both understand the service that are going to deliver. The
yes.
client, has their expectation. If a client was to come to me and say, for example, I have a Pinterest image,
Mm,
I want that, then I'd say that's not a design service. If a
mm,
client to me and says, I know exactly what I want, but I'd like you to be able to tell me, am I doing the right thing? That's being a sounding board, that's not a design service. However,
sure.
if a client would then say to me that, I know exactly what I want. I'd like to procure it for me. Then you know
Mm,
exactly the service you're going to provide. And, if that's a standalone service you provide as part of your studio, then,
yeah.
brilliant, because then you can execute accordingly and you can price accordingly as well. So I think it's really important to understand the client's expectations, to understand why they want to use your studio. Like, what are you going to add? What's the value add? And
Sure.
then from that point, you can really move forward knowing that you're meeting the client's expectations,
Mm,
or also considering, I feel, as a design studio, whether that client is a good match for you or not.
yes. That's actually
Yeah.
what I was wanting to quickly divert to as well. Have you ever had a situation where you felt that the client really was not a match for Interiorize?
I think you have to be honest with the
Mm,
client. You have to be honest with yourself. And, we never like turning clients away, and we always
mm,
try to deliver to the best of our ability and to deliver what the clients want. But there may be circumstances where they're not seeing the vision, or they're not
mm,
understanding the value really of what you're providing.
yes.
Our experience, our network of suppliers, all the hats you have to wear through the life
Mhm,
cycles. It's yeah, sometimes, unfortunately, if a client isn't isn't a good match for your studio,
yes.
then sometimes you have to say, well, I'm really sorry, but this may not work.
I absolutely agree. As you said, it needs to be it's transparency and honesty from the get go. And as you said
Yeah.
earlier as well, understanding that from the offset, what it is that their expectations are and what you are able to deliver at the end of the
Yeah.
day, based on that. So London design is increasingly influenced by global trends. I mean, Italian minimalism, Japanese restraint, Middle Eastern opulence. Are we at risk of losing distinctly British design identity?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think so. I think British design is evolving, really. We've
Mm,
always been influenced by global influences.
mm,
When you think about what's British and you think about the different design areas, you think about Georgian symmetry, you think about,
mm,
Victorian eclecticism, you think about the craftsmanship in art, in the arts and crafts era. All those different design periods have been influenced by
mm,
global influences, I'd say. So I think it's not so much a case of being eradicated, it's a case of evolving. It's nice
mm,
to be able to embrace Japanese minimalism. It's nice
yes.
to be able to embrace the warmth of the Asian cultures, the color and the
Mm,
pattern. So, but I think British design does it with almost a quiet sophistication. So it's
mm,
the balance of being able to draw upon all those influences, but be able to bring them together in a manner which would complement, I guess, the
mm.
architecture that we find ourselves living in.
It is influence, especially when it comes to Britain as well. I mean, there's so many different influences from all over, over
Yeah.
decades as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, with global tensions from Ukraine to the Middle East, I mean, have your clients supposed to design budgets or interiors change? So much going on, in the world right now, especially in those spaces. Has that approach changed for your clients at all?
It's impossible to ignore the global tensions, and I feel it has had a slight impact. There has been a
Mm,
shift, but it's more towards ensuring, timelessness, ensuring longevity. For my developer clients,
mm,
there's been a shift in looking at the lead times, looking at the
mm,
origin of projects, how long
mm,
will it take to arrive, the materiality.
mm,
And then for my clients, it's more about craftsmanship, finding pieces that will endure, will last. It's more about
mm.
investing in longer term pieces rather than, the culture of sort of, buy it now, we'll get rid of it later. So I think
Of
there has
course.
been a slight perception. It's like shift in practice and perception.
Mm.
definitely more thoughtful and more considered, I'd say.
Okay. But it makes sense as well. I mean, looking at, for what you are purchasing and what you're doing, and if you can get something that is long lasting and that longevity and sustainability, obviously, throughout the time,
Yes.
is vitally important. And it's interesting, as you were saying, the difference between, your investor clients versus your private clients, sort of looking at the two sectors and what's important, or the shifts that have actually happened just even amongst, that those two sectors is very, very interesting, and it possibly will, keep shifting and keep changing as well. I mean, and then we look at, sustainability. I mean, if sustainability were to be enforced legally rather than, let's say, voluntarily, I mean, how would the luxury design world shift tomorrow?
Yeah, there'd be quite a redefining impact actually if it was
Mm,
to be legally mandated. When we think about luxury, whether it's in the design sector or not, it's epitomized by exotic materials,
sure.
rarity, finite
Mm,
material. So if sustainability was to be legally enforced, then there'd have to be a
mm,
change in mindset, not only from the client, but also from the designer. The
mm,
client want more accountability really in, the
sure.
provenance, in where the pieces are originating from,
Mm,
how are they manufactured? From a designer's point of view, we'd have to consider low impact, materials,
mm,
we'd have environmental responsibility. So,
sure.
rather than a nice to have, it would be a complete mindset shift, really. And I feel that one that would have to happen slowly, it's a
Yeah.
real change, not only in, yeah, like I said, the mindset, but also in your practice.
Of course, yes. No, and I think it's going to take some time as well. And as you said, it is a mindset change, but as I
Yeah.
think within suppliers as well, so obviously to
Yes.
making sure and making it easier if that's the case as well with designers, knowing that the suppliers that they work with is already sustainability is already there. It's embedded in the work that is
Yeah.
done. It obviously then puts the clients at ease. Moving into a different conversation now, as we're looking at technology and AI and what that means for the future of design. I mean, how do you
Yeah.
see AI changing the role of the interior design world in the next 3 to 5 years? It's already
Yeah.
changed so much. I would say, like, possibly even just in the last 3 years. So
Absolutely.
how do you see that changing the role of it in the next 3 to 5 years now?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be quite profound, actually.
Mm,
I feel like I'm always playing catch up. So I'm still embracing AI. I'm still
mm,
learning about AI. I'm still trying to know how best to embed it. So the minute I try and learn one new
yes.
platform, something else has changed.
Next.
It's definitely evolving really, a really fast pace. I do feel, yes, it's going to change the way interior designers work in that we will be able to work quicker. We will be able to work
Sure.
faster. You
Mm,
know, AI can automate, it can streamline, it can
mm,
carry those heavy tasks, be it, technical documentation, be it
sure.
visualization. So absolutely, there is a place for it. But I also feel that there still will be a place for human led design. It won't be able to replace how you sort of, you walk into a property and how you
Mm,
feel all of a property. It won't be able to
see.
replace, the little dynamics that you may pick
Mm,
up, from a family,
course.
the emotional intelligence you will need when you deal with, your investor clients, your property
Absolutely.
developers. So there is still a place for human led design. We
Mm,
we will absolutely have to embrace it
sure.
to help streamline our processes, but it won't take,
Mm.
those more human aspects away from designers.
And as you said, it is that heart and that soul and that the environment and the nuances and that emotional connection to a space is only
Yeah.
really possible, through human touch and human influence. So no, I absolutely agree. But as you said as well, we're going to have to embrace that. We're going to have to embrace
Yeah.
technology and AI, and as you said as well, playing catch up all the time because it does. It's ever changing. Next thing you know, the next day the same platform as well has got multiple different other features. You don't really
Yes.
know where to look. But I mean, do you think the clients will soon expect design outputs to be faster,
Mhm.
cheaper, or more optimized? I mean, looking at algorithms and things. I mean, how does that sit with you? I mean, with people having access to all of this technology and AI as well. I mean, clients also go and look at different things. Does that really change the design output expectations from clients?
Yeah, I think there will be an expectation for designs to be faster, especially in the early stages of design.
Mm,
The concept, the
sure.
vision, potentially the 3D visualizations,
Mm,
all of those outputs will be much faster. With regard to, will that have an impact on our design fees and should we be cheaper?
mm,
I think absolutely not, in that we
mm,
still have to, we will almost be the directors of AI, the curators
yes.
of AI. So we can use AI to feed into our processes.
Mm,
However, going back to the human element, we still have to make judgment calls. We still have to be able
course.
to communicate. We still have to be able to understand the
Mm,
feedback, from our clients. That human centric approach,
mm,
the emotional intelligence, I don't think you can put a price on that. That's where you add value as a designer, the
sure.
way you build a rapport with your clients, the way
Of
you
course.
communicate with your clients, the way your clients entrust you to make good judgment calls.
Mm,
So, although algorithms may perfect, I don't think they will overtake.
sure.
Tasks can be accelerated, but you can't
Mm,
replace tact, really. You can't
mm,
replace emotion. So, yeah, I think there is a place for it. However, I don't think clients should expect that as a result of
mm,
AI. And clients themselves are experimenting with AI.
exactly.
There was a situation where a client, generated an AI image and said,
Mm,
that's what I like. So they're
yes.
experimenting. But
Mm,
again, who's going to bring all those elements together? Who's going to humanize them? Who's going to organize? Who's going to procure? All of that.
of course.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think they are very important. It is time to embrace it. But, you have to guide and steer AI as well. And you have, to bring it forward. But also, I don't think it would ever disagree or fight back with you as AI
Yeah.
would. I think, do need that human interaction, that human touch with your clients, to debating what could work, what could not. Asked
Yeah.
earlier how important that is with that relationship and that conversation that needs to happen, especially having to guide them and even steer your clients into directions that could work for both parties. The same thing I think would apply, having to work, with the technology that is available. Of course, like you said as well, clients are experimenting and they've got access to these things as well. And I think, as you mentioned, it's vitally important that they don't then go into expecting that to be the case, because not everything that AI generates is even possible
Yes.
in real time,
Yeah.
until you actually, test it out, to see what happens. So it is vitally important, but it'd be very interesting to see what it's going to be like. It's a
Yeah.
little bit daunting for myself, to be honest.
I
I'm a
know.
little bit
No.
interested to see what's going to happen there. But I mean, it is going to, as you said, we have to embrace it. It is here. We're not necessarily going to be able
Yeah.
to get rid of it, but making sure the clients also understand there are limitations, within what
Of
they
course.
want, what they've seen as well, I guess. And now moving a little bit into, the industry and ethics and the designer's role today. I mean, are
Yeah.
clients today less emotionally invested in craftsmanship and more focused on speed, convenience, and resale value? I mean, life is so fast paced at the moment. Everyone wants things now, and I mean, how do you feel about that of clients today?
Yeah, I feel it depends on the type of client, actually. As
Sure.
I mentioned, we're quite fortunate to have a client base consisting of private clients and investor clients. So
Mm,
it really depends on the type of client and, what they're looking for. For the investor client, the luxury is the speed of execution.
mm,
It's
mhm,
timeliness, it's how quickly, it's the elevated design. Like, how can you give me an elevated design, but offer it in a timely manner? So that's the luxury. Whereas for private clients, it's about the craftsmanship. So,
mm, mm,
I think there is a place for both. And actually, there's a middle ground as well, because now you're finding that there are clients that want to have their homes personal for the
Mm,
now and make them livable, but also make sure they have broad market appeal for the future. And I
yes.
feel, this is where our design philosophy of livable luxury
Mm,
really has a place.
of
It's a
course.
case of producing something or creating something for your client that's
Mm,
livable, but it's also beautiful.
of
It's
course. Yes.
functional, it's usable, but it's personal to them. So it's a case of
Mm,
blending all of those elements to ensure that they have something that they're really happy with right
mm.
here and now. But if they were to move in the future, that property, that design will have a broader market appeal.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And as you said as well, it also, I think, comes into the timelessness of it as well, making something timeless as well, longevity, as you mentioned as well, with the clients already looking at as well. And, you know, investing in, in the private properties or in, the public sectors and things like that as well. So
Yeah.
I feel that that is definitely, something that they are considering. But it's interesting, as you said as well, again, with your investment properties versus your private clients, it's very interesting just to see how everyone's minds and what they're expecting is so not vastly different, but different,
Yes.
in what they are expecting. With many wealthy Londoners relocating to the UAE, I mean, South Europe and Singapore, have you noticed clients designing homes here as investments rather than personal spaces?
Yeah, I'd say there's been a slight shift, but at Interiorise, we've always been used to, because we deal with both sets of clients,
Sure.
we've always, incorporated, should I say, an
Mm,
element of investment, into our
sure.
design. So we think about the timeless color palettes. We think
Mm,
about the functional layout such that if a family was to live there or if a tenant was to live there,
mm,
does this layout work? Do the colors work? Do they have, broad market appeal? So rather than personalizing them to an extent
mm,
where, a client may think, oh my goodness, if I inject all the colors or everything I want into this home, when I come to resell it, I might have to redo the whole thing. We try to
sure.
incorporate both worlds and blend both of those worlds seamlessly
Yes.
such that, a property is livable. But if you are
Mm,
going to resell value, you think about, okay, well, how do we almost future proof this?
of
If
course.
we
Yes.
are to leave or if we are to invest in a property in the future.
Absolutely. Is there actually a property that you designed that you absolutely loved? Is there one that you could say was really a standout project for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've been quite fortunate in that we've had the opportunity to go into some really beautiful properties and very diverse, in fact. So,
Mm,
with, a six-story townhouse that we've recently designed for in Knightsbridge, and that was we really, we really embraced the heritage of the
mm,
property. Period of the property. Our design was quite classic.
okay.
Although we introduced some modern elements again to ensure that
Mm,
it was livable, we really embraced some of the more traditional aspects in our design. But at the same time, we were designing for a client and it was a six
mm,
bedroom penthouse along the river.
sure.
So, and that was very contemporary, very sleek. So it was
Mm,
really lovely to think about both those designs, at the same time and really invest in the architecture of the property, in the
absolutely.
area, in the demographics. So
That's amazing. I can imagine as well, every single property is so different as well. And
yeah,
it's one thing I think that's so wonderful about the creative industries as well. Everything's different. Every
yeah,
experience is different. Nothing is ever going to be the same. But in that, I mean, that's in itself, I mean, so memorable and, stands the test of time because no space is ever going to be the same as another space and what it
yeah.
means to everything. So I think that's fantastic. And I'm sure that you've got a lot of great upcoming projects as well. But it was absolutely wonderful to have you on the podcast with us today. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your approach to creating, elegant functional spaces that feel truly lived in. And it's absolute pleasure to have had you here today. Right?
Thank you, Imka. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Really enjoyed speaking to you.
It
Thank you
was
so much.
Wonderful. And to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you so much again for tuning into FCI London podcast. Keep following and keep designing, and join us again as we continue our conversations with London's most influential luxury designers. Until next time.